Yes, it would have been a shame if I didn't think of that until the end. The session will be recorded and it'll be available for you to view for 1 week after tonight's session. So that's to accommodate anybody that may have to leave early for maybe a crying baby or God knows what. So that's fine. So that'll be available to you, and we'll be sending out that link to you tomorrow afternoon. Okay, so I might just get started with an overview. So just bear with me now till I get my slide there. So first of all, I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping with you. This is a webinar style presentation because of the large number of people on this meeting. So I'll be running through the content. If you do have any questions, do please add them to the chat. And what we will do is we will answer them on the email with the link tomorrow. So we will answer and aim to answer all the questions that way, if that's okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CDI, so the Childhood Development Initiative, and who we are. I'm going to go through an overview of communication development. We're going to talk about milestones, and we're also going to talk about late talkers and the importance of gesture. And then, as if you haven't got enough on your plate, I'm going to give you some homework to do and to try out with your little ones. And then Gemma will pick up for session 2 next Wednesday, and she'll be talking you through various ways to encourage communication development. She's going to touch on bilingualism and give you a couple of strategies around supporting your child's communication development. And session 3, Alison is going to lead out on that one, and that's all about getting started with books and reading to your child. And we're going to go through dialogic reading and how to support language development through reading. Okay, so quite a lot of content. So just in terms of housekeeping, so we would appreciate if all microphones were muted. The recording is in progress, so I would encourage you to turn off your cameras, because this recording will be going out to everybody that has signed up to this webinar. So do please put your video off if you can. Any questions to have, pop them into the chat. We will take note of them and endeavour to answer them by email. And do please make yourself comfortable. It is 7:30 on a Wednesday evening, middle of the week. As I said, time changes and everything, catching up with everybody. So do feel free to make a cuppa and make yourself comfy for the next kind of 45 minutes or so. So we do recommend, if you want, to have to your screen and speaker view. So if you go up to the very top of your screen, you should get an icon for view options. And if you do a drop down to that, you can have a side-by-side mode. So you'll be able to see me and the presentation side by side. You won't be distracted by other people's names and things like that. So it is just a nice way to view a presentation. So we do recommend that. So CDI, who are we? So we're the Childhood Development Initiative, and we're based in Tallawest, and we have a number of programs that we roll out in Dublin 24. Some of them you may be familiar with, such as the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. We also have our Antenatal 3 initiative, which is for under 3s, and our Powerful Parenting program, which is where we have a parent care facilitator located in various early year settings. We also have our Chit Chat program, which is our early intervention speech and language therapy program, and we have various literacy programs called Doodle Den and Doodle Families. So that's just a little kind of overview of our programs. We are funded under the government's area-based childhood program, and that is rolled out through TUSLA. So I'll read you our mission statement here to give you a good idea of what we're about. So we aim to improve outcomes for children by delivering quality, integrated, evidence-informed services and workforce development through partnership and innovation. So we see that, we like to work in collaboration with everybody, and our core principles are working in partnership with people, taking a strengths-based, family and child-centred approach. So that is why we're here this evening, but that's why we put this talk together. We recognise, obviously, that there is a gap in services for parents and a gap in, I suppose, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted waiting lists and services and public health nurse checks. so that you may have missed a check for your child, or you may have been, or you could be on a waiting list for speech and language therapy, which has gotten longer due to the impact of COVID and redeployment. So we're really trying to support parents through delivering this program tonight and over the next 2 Wednesdays. And we would really appreciate your feedback on that. And my colleague Alison will be sharing a link to a survey that we designed. It'll literally take you 5 minutes or less. And we would really appreciate your feedback. And bear in mind, this is the first time that we've delivered this series of talks, and we would be very interested to hear your feedback, good and negative, positive and negative. So please feel free to be honest about your thoughts, because it'll help us to improve should we be in a position to roll it out again. Okay, so just in terms of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, if you're living in Dublin 24 and you have a child under 5 and you haven't signed up to the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, I would really encourage you to do so. My colleague Alison will put the link into the chat for you to sign up, and basically it's a free book gifting program where your child gets delivered to your house in the post a new book every month until they're 5. So it's really, really lovely resource and program to be a part of, and it's completely free for children in Dublin 24. So that's just a little bit about that. So I'll introduce you to our chit chat team. So I'm Michelle Quinn, the coordinator and senior SLT, and we have Alison Butler, who will be leading out on session 3. And we have Gemma Coakley, who is a speech and language therapist with us, and she will be leading out on session 2, which is next Wednesday. Okay, so how does communication develop? So it may seem like a simple question, but communication is more than just talking. It's any form of message that's sent from one party to another through sounds or words or physical hints, like body language. So it can be any number of those things. In terms of, when we think about babies, they won't say their first meaningful words until they're generally around a year old, all things going well. But even if they can't form words yet, your baby is still trying to communicate with you through cries and coos and facial expressions, etc. So, when it comes to communication, baby learns by watching the people around them. So you, their parents, their carers. And even if they don't have the vocabulary to have a conversation with you, it's very helpful for the communication development if you speak to them and narrate your day. So, when we believe that babies do communicate right from birth and understand how they communicate, we can enjoy the wonders of interaction and relationships with even the youngest of people. So that's quite a nice quote there, even though I'm small, I'm already a unique person, sensing, thinking, feeling, needing, and experiencing. I communicate this to you through my own special language, my own behavior. I love it when you wonder about what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and try to understand what I'm saying. So, babies and toddlers, they do an incredible amount of growing in the first few months of life, and most of this is hidden away in their extraordinary little brains. And babies are born with billions of brain cells, which can only function properly when they're connected to each other. So these nerve connections are made when baby experience being talked to, being touched, being fed, or comforted, so being interacted with. So as a parent, if you're sensitive to your baby's signals and responding to their needs, this enables your baby's brain and synapses and connections to form and to be maintained and to grow and to develop. And it gives them a lifelong capacity for resilience against stress and emotional imbalance. And in turn, it leads children to make sense of their emotions and understanding the world around them, including their language development, and feeling security in their relationships. And this is where relationships and babies can thrive. So this is quite a nice little little sheet here, and we will be sending these slides out to you tomorrow as well. So we can sub baby for toddler, they're interchangeable here. So sometimes, you know, when we're looking at our babies and they're crying or they're happy and laughing, you know, it's like, what you're wondering, what is your baby saying to you? What is your baby like? What's his or her personality? You know, when we're expecting our children, we think, you know, you don't know who you're going to get, and who arrives when they're born. So it's about discovering who they are and what their personality is and their uniqueness, and what does your baby like to do, or what do they like to look at. And all of these are important, because when we go on to develop, thinking about language development, we look at, you know, following the child's interest, following their lead. So asking these wondering questions sets us up nicely for tracking as the child grows, being able to adapt our own interaction skills and our own development and our own knowledge around our child. You know, even knowledge around how does your baby react to noise or light? How does your toddler react to noise or light? How does your baby or toddler react when you pick her up, or him or her up, or when you go to change their nappy? How do they like to be comforted? How do they like to comfort themselves? What position do they like to be in? You know, all of these wondering questions that help us tune into our baby and tune into our babies and toddlers' communication, and who they are, helps us to understand them a little bit better. So when we speak about language development, and when we speak about language, we talk about, speech and language therapists talk about receptive and expressive communication skills. So from birth, babies begin to develop two sets of communication skills. So they are receptive and expressive. So receptive is the understanding of language, and expressive skills is the expressive communication. So that's the verbal communication, it's the pointing, it's the gesture, it's the expressiveness. So receptive language is the ability to receive and understand a message from another person. When babies are listening, they turn their head towards your voice. That's something to, you know, be observing. Are they doing that? Are they responding to their name? And they'll respond to simple directions, often with vocalizations. Early on, these vocalizations will be just sounds, but as baby approaches their first birthday, they'll begin to use meaningful language. They'll begin to, you know, use their first words, all things going well. Not every child will have their first words their first birthday, but all things going well, we'd be expecting it to emerge around that time. So we see that the arrow, the information is going into baby here. And expressive communication is the ability to convey a message to another person through sounds, speech, signs, or writing. So babies use expressive communication by crying. We all know that one. Babbling, and using body language. So it could be, you know, flapping their arms if they're excited, and kicking their legs, and same for your toddler. It could be running on the spot when they're excited. So, you know, all of these are forms of expressive communication. So I hope that's clear between the two. So when we as speech and language therapists are looking at children's language, we're looking at both their receptive understanding, how much are they able to understand, and what's their expressive language like, along with a couple of other things that we will touch on over the course of the presentation. So I'm just going to share a video with you now.
It's important that you get down to your child's level so that you're both looking and talking about the same things. Make eye contact with your child to let them know you're listening and that you want to interact with them. For example, if your child is lying down on the floor playing, lie down beside them and join in with what they're doing. You'll notice what your child is paying attention to, and you will relate to each other much more easily. Children start to understand words by hearing them used over and over again. Talk about things that you can both see. Use simple language to describe everyday things that you're doing. You can then start to extend your child's language by adding in more words. For example, start by saying, "It's a dog," before expanding to say, "It's a big dog. The dog is barking. It's a noisy dog." Your child will then start to pick up new words to use for themselves. Listen to what your child has to say and repeat back to them, modelling simple phrases. You can add in any missing words or pronounce sounds in the right way. This gives your child the opportunity to hear how words should sound. It's important to model words in this way. This is different from correcting their speech. You're not telling your child they've said something wrong. You can simply repeat the words back to them. This will let your child know that you've listened to them, as well as helping them to pronounce words correctly in the future. It's been proven that dummies can reduce the risk of cot death in babies up to 12 months. However, after 12 months, dummies aren't needed during the day. Using a dummy affects a child's speech and language development because dummies in mouths mean children can't produce speech sounds correctly. It's important for your child to be able to communicate with you and not have to talk with a dummy in their mouth. Give your child different options so that they can make choices for themselves. This will allow your child to develop their shared communication and interaction skills, which is key to language development. You can encourage your child to make choices in everyday situations. For example, if you're at a park, ask your child whether they would like to play on the swings or play on the slide. Then make sure you give your child enough time to consider the question and make up their mind. Smartphones, tablets and TVs can be great educational tools for children. However, it's important to remember that screen time does not replace talking with your child. When the TV is on, watch it with your child, join in with the songs and play the games together. But make sure you turn it off afterwards and engage in a conversation. Screens can often distract from real life interaction, which is far more important. Share books with your child and talk about the pictures as you go through. Try and choose books about everyday activities and read the same ones over and over again. This will help your child understand sentences and how to use words correctly. Sing nursery rhymes and encourage your child to join in with the actions. You could also come up with your own nursery rhymes about everyday things that you're doing. Try and leave pauses for your child to fill in the gaps themselves. Give your child the opportunity to play and explore, then follow their lead. Watch to see what they're looking at or playing with, and then talk about it with them. Make sure you listen to what they have to say and then repeat it back to them. You can extend the vocabulary to help them pick up new phrases. Playing games is a great way of developing your child's attention and listening skills. Make sure you put aside time in your day to stop what you're doing and play with your child. This could just be 5 or 10 minutes of one-to-one interaction at home. Questions can be hard to understand. Try to reduce the number of questions you ask your child and comment instead. Give them the words to use. For example, rather than asking, "What is this?" say to your child, "This is a teddy bear." Try the 5-finger rule. For every question, back it up with 4 comments. Make sure you emphasise the object words in your sentences. This will help them to enhance their vocabulary and think about the words that you say. The language development pyramid shows us the different communication skills that children develop. It's important to understand that foundation skills such as attention and listening are really important for the development of skills higher up the pyramid. Playing games and interacting with your child in ways that provide an opportunity and reason to communicate will help to develop your child's attention and listening, understanding, vocabulary and turn-taking skills. These skills are just as important as being able to say words clearly. Playing with your child is a really important way to improve your child's language development. Remember, you are your child's best teacher.
Okay, so that's a really nice little video there, which covers quite a lot of information. I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint there if I can. It's typical now, so this happens. Okay, can we see? I'm back to the PowerPoint there. Is that a screen sharing is paused? Sorry, stop share, and I'll just reshare. Now, hopefully we're back in there now at the right slide. So that was quite a nice little video there that went through a number of points, and we will be sending out the link to that video, so you might even have a look at it again when you're if you want to revisit anything there. So it ended on the communication pyramid, and I'm going to talk a little bit about here, the language tree, and I suppose babies learn language and develop their skills incrementally as they grow and develop, and as as their brain develops. So we were talking about the brain and the synapses and the connections that begin as a baby, and they grow and develop, and it's over a long period of time. And so what are the things that help us to grow? So we have the environment down at the bottom, we have the culture and the society and the genes. So they're the kind of foundation pieces if you think about the child and the child's immediate world that they're interacting with. And then we have the next level of skills, which is we see the kind of baby babbling, we see their visual learning, their perception skills, they develop fine and gross motor skills, and we're going to be talking about gesture now in a minute, and their cognitive development and their socio-emotional development as well. So that's the kind of next level. And then comes the language comprehension. So that's the understanding of language and the motivation to talk. And if we look here at the little watering can, that's developed through nurture and stimulation and constant positive interactions with caregivers and important people in the child's life. So that begins from infancy, from birth, all the way through the first year and the second year. And then, at the first year mark, we kind of then see vocabulary development. So we might hear their first words. And as mothers, we always want that to be mama, and more often than not, it's dada. But we see that around kind of the year mark, and then it gets a little bit more sophisticated. So in terms of their grammar structure then develops. So then they start joining two words, and they start using a noun and a verb. Such as mommy go, want more, and then we're listening to then their speech sounds. So how do they actually sound? So that's their articulation and their phonology, as we call it. So what patterns are they using in their speech? And all the while their communication is developing. And we see at the very top of the tree then the literacy development. So all of this is feeding into a child's literacy development. And we have, the sun in the corner, the warmth, the love, the acceptance. So all of these things are here around the child, that contributes to language development. And every child is unique, and every child will develop at their own pace, at their own time. So I'd encourage you to see your child as a unique individual. They may have an older sibling, they may have a younger sibling who may have walked earlier or later, who may have talked earlier and later. I'd encourage you to view your child as a unique individual, and they're on their own unique development path. And just because an older sibling talked earlier or talked later, it has no bearing really on the individual child. So that's just a word of kind of word around that there. And it's as parents, I think we're all guilty of it. I'm definitely guilty of it, comparing, but do try not to compare and to take your child for where they're at. And I'd really encourage, if you're concerned about your child, I'd really encourage you to just take out a notepad, pop it onto the kitchen counter and jot down a couple of things. Jot down your child's strengths, their communication strengths. They will always have strengths. So jot them down, and jot down maybe your concerns, and notice, when they're saying words, or how they're communicating, how they're requesting for things, what their speech sounds like. And that means that you can really tune in to your child. You have the evidence there, you can look at it and you can see it there. Oftentimes we think something and it might not be actually factually correct, but when we collect the data, it allows us to really step back and see where the child is at. So I'm going to talk now about milestones and kind of typical development. What do we expect and when do we expect it? Okay, and so we're going to slightly differentiate between a milestone and the average range. So the average range for children under 5 is quite large. So you will know children who may have walked at 10 months. You will know children who didn't walk until they were 15 or 16 months or 17 months. And that's all within the average range. However, that's a very wide range. And as children grow and develop, the range kind of gets smaller. We're more certain, we have more knowledge in the literature, in the research of what we can expect and when we can expect it. So a milestone is referring to a stage that 90% of children are at. So it's very important that we're paying attention to milestones, and averages, that's for 50% of the children. So if we see here for 12 months, the milestone is one word, that they're saying one word. And the average is 2 to 6. So 50% of all 1-year-olds will have 2 to 6 words, and 90% of 1-year-olds will have one word. At 18 months, we see that increase. So the milestone is 10 words. So 90% of 18-month-old children will have, around 10 words, will have 10 words. And the average will be 50 words. So 50 words, 50% of all children who are 18 months will have 50 words, okay? And then by 24 months, we see the milestone is increasing. So by 24 months, we are expecting that 90% of children at this age group will have 50 words expressively. So they'll be saying 50 words. And the average, so 50% of all 24-month-old children will have 250 words. And then at 36 months, that's the 3-year age group, the milestone is 250 words and the average is 1,000 words. So we can see how language is developing incrementally. And what I would say to you is, if you have a child at these specific increments and they're not at this, if they're not reaching the milestone, I would say to you, don't panic just yet. Don't be panicked about this. These are guidelines, and as I said before, every child will be on their own unique path. This is just a visual representation of it here. So as we can see, the red is the milestone and the average is 50 is the blue piece there. So we can see the milestone and then the average at 24 months and the milestone, the average at 36 months. Okay, so now that brings us on to late talkers. So who is a late talker and what do we mean by late talkers? So generally speaking, a late talker is a toddler who's between 18 months and 30 months, who has generally good understanding of language. So that when you're speaking to them, you feel they know what you're saying to them. And maybe you're able to give short instructions and say, get your coat, get the ball, get your spoon, we're going to the park, that they understand, what you're saying. And that their motor skills are where they should be. So they're walking, they're running. If you're bringing them to the playground, they're able to navigate, for their age group. Thinking skills and social skills will be pretty good, and that they're, you wouldn't be concerned around their social interaction with other children or with with peers or siblings. But they're going to have a limited spoken vocabulary for their age. So that is the typical, when we talk about a late talker, that's what we're really talking about. So the question that we're always asked is, do children who are late talkers catch up on their own? So because this group of children is progressing well in all other areas of development, really, in terms of, they have good understanding, their social skills are good, and their motor skills are good. So parents and others, they may assume that children will catch up on their own. And indeed, many late talkers do catch up on their own, and they do, inverted commas, grow out of it. And oftentimes children, when they're developing at this young age group, sometimes it ebbs and flows. So their motor development might be taking over, and you might bring them to a playground they haven't been in a while, and you see, God, they're able to navigate a certain structure that they weren't able to do before. That's because their motor development has taken a leap. Meanwhile, speech and language hasn't been as active. And then suddenly you'll find the motor development eases off and speech and language comes back into development. So oftentimes it kind of ebbs and flows. So do try to be tuned into that also. So many late talkers do grow out of it, but also many do not. And I suppose it's really, that's why, we'd like to share this information with you, so you can be really tuned into this. Because obviously the earlier we're recognizing children might need support with their communication development, and the better the outcomes are. So some risk factors that are kind of widely reported in the literature and fairly robust is that you'd be thinking about back to your baby as an infant. Were they quiet as an infant, or were they a strong babbler? When they were in the cot by themselves, were they gooing and garring and babbling? When they were lying on the play mat, were they making vocalizations and sounds? And if you do have a little baby at that stage, I'd be encouraging you to get face to face with them and have that back and forth babble with them. It's such an important prerequisite to language development. Also, another thing to watch out for is whether a child has a history of ear infections. So oftentimes children's eustachian tubes, not to get too technical, so that's, if you're on an airplane, and I know due to COVID, I haven't been on an airplane in ages, but when we are on airplanes and we do have that sensation of our ears, the pressure in our ears, and we swallow, and that releases that pressure. What's happening there is your eustachian tubes, which connects your middle ear and your inner ear, and to the back of your throat, is pulling down a little bit, and it's letting that air back up into your middle ear. So in adults, our eustachian tubes are more like this, whereas in children, they're more horizontal. So unfortunately, that does lead, they're more prone to having fluid in the middle ear and it lodging there, whereas in adults, because it is of this nature, it tends to drain out. So the middle ear is should be an air chamber, and there should be no fluid in it, because it's 3 tiny little bones that have to move in that in order to be able to hear sound and convert it into sound into the brain. So children can have middle ear infections, and they can have glue ear. So just watch out for that. If your child does have repeated ear infections, they may have a glue ear, and I would encourage you to check that out with an audiologist who can check for the pressure in the ear and let you know if that's okay or if it's not as it should be. So also we'd be looking at the number of sounds that a child would have. So we'd be looking for a wide sound repertoire, since they have like b, p, m, t, d, m, y, k, g, so that they'd have, those sounds, and we'd be listening to their babble closely to see what sounds that they are using. A really, good thing to tune into is children's play. It can tell us an awful lot about their development. If you're seeing that they're not linking pretend ideas and actions together while playing, so We see symbolic play kind of emerging in young children, kind of that they're imitating real life. They're going around with the phone, pretending to be on the phone, or, you know, brushing Dolly's hair, or having a little tea party, or pouring the tea in, or feeding Dolly, feeding Teddy. So we'd be looking at their play skills there. We would also be looking at, do they copy or imitate words or sounds? So if you're face to face with your child and you're making a sound, are they copying it or copying words? What kind of words are they using? Are they mostly nouns, like the name of people, or are they using a couple of verbs such as action words? Are they experiencing any difficulty playing with their peers? Do they prefer to play alone, or are they sociable? And do they enjoy interaction with others? Is there any family history of communication delay, learning or academic difficulties? And we'd also be tuning in to if you feel like they're not understanding you, or if you feel like that would be delayed for their age. So the main thing is, you know, to be tuned into your child. And that's where I was saying, get the pad onto the kitchen counter and jot down their strengths. So what they are able, you know, what they are doing, and then any concerns, and be watching out for that. And it's a lovely way to actually track development, particularly if you're concerned around language development, because oftentimes you can see a boom, you know, coming you know, when a child does start to talk, that sometimes that they, you know, they just take off, and you'll be able to note down the words that they are saying and keep a track of it. So that is kind of, you know, a bit around late talkers. And I want to kind of really emphasize the importance of gesture, because gesture requires motor skills, and they can help predict language skills. So gestures are communication, and they're really important to pay attention to. And children can begin to use gesture as early as 8 or 9 months of age, and some gestures, you know, can take longer to develop, or they're dependent on cultural norms and things like that. But gestures can predict language development. So is your toddler clapping? You know, is your toddler waving? Is your toddler putting up their arms, you know, for up? You know, are they using gesture? Or what kind of gesture are they using? So just important to tune into that, and also to encourage gesture. So how to get started with gesture would be pairing gesture with a word. So you know, for lifting them out of the cot, or lifting them out of the, you know, the high chair, it'd be, you know, up. So up, you want to get up, you know, so you're pairing it with a word. And this makes it easier for a child to learn the meaning of the word and the gesture. And remember that motor imitation often comes before verbal imitation. So the importance of imitation is kind of pivotal to all language development. So they're likely to attempt to imitate a gesture before they say a word. So another thing that we'd recommend is, you know, to give and show items to your child while interacting with them, and model the use of various gestures. So when your child uses a gesture, acknowledge it, you know, by copying it and saying the word that matches that gesture. And a great way to use gesture in a really fun way is to sing songs that use gesture and make gesture fun. So try the wheels on the bus, and, you know, the wipers on the bus go swish, 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 and the doors go open and shut, and the horn goes beep, 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 you know. So it's just important to have fun with that and repeat it, and, you know, try to encourage it, you know, with your child. And if they're having a hard time, try adding the cause and effect. So for example, you know, do the sign for beep, beep before you beep the horn. So they're learning that there's a cause and effect there, and they're hearing the sound of the horn there, if that makes sense. So just a couple of different types of gestures, you know, giving, showing, pointing, waving, clapping, you know, blowing a kiss, high five, doing shh, you know, baby's asleep, thumbs up, yes, nodding the head, shaking the head. Obviously sometimes the first word, like, one of the first words is no from your toddler. And that's when the trouble starts. Are they doing like a whole hand point, so pointing with their whole hand, or are they isolating the index finger? It's important. There, are they reaching up, and when you're talking about where, using your arms and using that exaggerated gesture will help support your child's gesture development. And this in turn supports their language development. So we've spoken about receptive language, expressive language, and we watched the video there that talked about a couple of strategies, in terms of being face-to-face with your child. We discussed the language pyramid and the language tree. So now we're going to talk a little bit about speech sound development. So speech development is how clear should your child's pronunciation be? Excuse me. So by 2 years, we're expecting them to be 50% intelligible. So what does that word intelligible mean? Well, it means that we understand 50% of what they're saying, and that's normal at 2 years. Children are allowed to make errors in their speech sound development. By 3 years of age, we're expecting them to be 75% intelligible. So we're expecting to understand 3/4 of what they're saying. So that's not 100% or anything near it. It's 3/4. So they're still allowed to make certain speech sound errors. And we see here that the number of sounds they say, we're listening out for those sounds, has increased obviously from 2. And then by 4 years, we're listening out. They should be, in or around 100% intelligible. They should have minimal, excuse me, they should have minimal, speech sound errors. However, there's still maybe 1 or 2 things that haven't developed fully yet. You might notice they say it sometimes correct and sometimes not correct, and that means that it is developing. And obviously just to highlight that the or, the sound, and the th sound, so the th sound, are often the last ones to come in, and we give children generally up to around the end of their 6th year with that sound, because there's actually 21 variations of or in the English language, and it is coloured by the vowel. So for example, parrot and car are 2 very different sounds, if you're with me. So we do give them, it's a more complex sound, so we do give them a little bit more time with that. Okay, so that's just in terms of their speech sound development. So it's good to be tuned into that also. And a good kind of what would you say, a good way of kind of measuring that would be asking yourself the question, how do people outside of the family understand my child, in their preschool or their creche or their the wider family, aunts and uncles? Are they intelligible to unfamiliar listeners? Because often we as parents are very tuned into our child's speech, but if others are really struggling to understand them, bearing in mind these guidelines here, you'd be checking against the guidelines to see, is it something that you should be concerned about or something that is typical for this age group. Okay. So then, obviously the relationships between speech, language and literacy is intertwined. So in terms of speech sound development and the child's phonological awareness, the child's ability to identify rhyme and isolate sounds and hear the sound at the beginning of the word and the end of the word, is all that's all encompassing in their speech sound system, and that kind of intertwines into their oral language and then into their literacy and writing, because if they can't say it, they're not going to be able to write it down effectively or split it up, in terms of writing and, even sounding out words and decoding words. So that's why we say, there's a critical age hypothesis where it's best to intervene and, I suppose encourage the child to be at the chronological age level before they're 5.5, because otherwise it can impact on their literacy skills. And I think that makes sense if we're thinking about literacy in terms of, early literacy development, in terms of phonological awareness, hearing sounds, the beginning end of words, or being able to segment sounds and things like that. So I'm just going to touch on fluency here, because sometimes we also have parents who have concerns around their child's fluency. And sometimes parents will say to us that my child has recently started stammering or stuttering. Is this normal or is it not? Is it a phase? Is it something I should be worried about? So as toddlers and preschoolers start using more and more language and knowing more and more words and using it, they may begin to stumble over their words. And it's not uncommon for young children to have disfluencies in their speech, such as word or phrase repetitions. And roughly around 5% of all children will likely, be disfluent at some point in their development. And it's usually between the age of 2.5 and 5. And that can be very worrying for a parent, because it just comes on quite suddenly. It's very typical for a child to go back and forth between periods of fluency and disfluency, and sometimes can occur for no apparent reason. But often this happens when a child is excited, if they're tired, or if they feel rushed to speak, or maybe it's a busy family and there's only a small amount of airtime and they're trying to get their message out under pressure. And that's where the fluency can come into play. So during this time, generally children are expanding their vocabularies rapidly, and they're learning complex language rules, and their grammar is developing. So sometimes we see a mismatch between the child's vocabulary development and their knowledge of words, which is up here, and their grammar knowledge can be sitting slightly lower than that. So therefore, there's a little bit of a mismatch, which causes that disfluency. So, we're waiting for that to even out in their profile to enhance their fluency. So for most toddlers and preschoolers, most disfluencies will go away on their own after a short period of time. However, in other cases, some can persist and the signs of stammering become more obvious. And how parents can tell the difference between typical disfluencies that go away and the early time signs of non-typical disfluencies. So how do we tell the difference between child that's going through a phase because there's a mismatch in their language, or a child that is at risk of persistent stammering? So we don't know until the child has passed through that. So in reality, it's a retrospective diagnosis of typical stuttering, or it was just a phase of language development that the child went through. So it's just important, to slow down your speech if your child is going through a period of disfluency. Have a system for taking turns when you're at home. Don't correct disfluency. We don't want to draw attention to that. Listen to your child's message. So it's important to listen to their communicative intent there and respond to it as you normally would. Reduce their questions and the pressure on the child, and try to use some special time with your child. And we'll be talking about special time coming up. So that's just a little overview of fluency there. And if anyone has any specific questions about fluency, you can pop them in the chat and we will email responses to you. So in terms of tips on how to encourage language communication at home, and Gemma is going to go into more depth in this next week, but really, we'd be recommending modeling. So saying the words you think your child might want to say. For example, if they're looking at a dog, say, "Look, doggy," "woof, woof." And oftentimes animal sounds are the first words, they're counted as words. And so we've really encouraged those for your children. Repeat. So affirm you've heard what the child has said. So for example, if your child says truck, you can say, "Yes, truck." "Yes, a big truck." So extending it as well. So thinking about nursery rhymes as well. So if a child knows 8 nursery rhymes by heart by the time they're 4 years old, they're usually among the best readers and spellers in their class. That's by the time they're 8. So that goes back to what I was speaking about in terms of the link between language and literacy. Speech sound development and literacy development. And if you think about why are nursery rhymes so important, because it's actually phonological awareness. It's rhyming words. It's words that sound the same, words that sound different. They're very repetitive in nature. The children are hearing repetitive sounds as they go through learning their different nursery rhymes. And this helps them in hearing sounds, segmenting sounds, and then in turn helps them with their literacy development. So it's really important there. So this is a little bit of homework for everybody. And we're coming to the end of the session. So the homework I'm going to give you, and I know everybody is busy, but it is, research is telling us that special time with our children has really positive outcomes. It's very robust literature that is telling us that. And it's not only for speech and language, it's for behavior, it's for connection, it's for relationship building. So what does that mean? It means setting aside time every day to talk and play and read to your child. Put the phone down, turn the television off, and dedicate that 100% 100% time to your child. Follow their lead and see what they would like to do. Don't be too hard on yourself either, in terms of what you can manage. So some parents may be able to manage 20 minutes a day with each child. Some may be only able to manage 5 minutes a day with each child. You might have multiple children at home and busy lives, in and out of school, work, etc. So, do set yourself a goal and aim to achieve it. So it could be 10 minutes per day. Consistently would be better than aiming for 30 minutes and not achieving it, And really it's that one-to-one time where you connect 100% with your child with no agenda and no distractions. And it's just really, you're delighting in your child and connecting with them at their level. So we would recommend limiting background noise and just connect with your child with all of your heart. Really notice your child, follow their lead, their interests. If they want to play with his blocks, don't rush and tell them how to build a tower or take a directive role within the play. Instead, watch and look with intention and maybe copy what they're doing, and get into their world and get into their play. And you can add language to that, and you can say what you see without interfering with the play. And if anybody is bilingual or is raising a bilingual child, do speak in your own home language that you're most confident in. And it's important to learn for children to learn their first words and sentences in their home language. And that's really kind of supported in the research and literature as well in terms of language development for bilingual children. So we're going to just, in terms of screen time then, just something to be aware of. Screens are everywhere. We've got, smartphones, iPads, tablets, TVs, smart TVs, screens are everywhere. So what we would recommend is try to, support good content around screens, and there's loads of wonderful content around screens, and I'm going to go show you a couple of things for this age group which are really good, and try to engage with screen time if you can, sitting down, commenting on what you're seeing or what's happening on the screen. So a couple of really good programs, if you're concerned about your child's language development, a couple of really good programs are, Steve and Maggie. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Steve and Maggie. We have huge fans in our house. So basically Steve, and there's he comes in a range of languages. And it's a program, for young children. Originally, he was teaching English as a second language. And I just pop out of it here and just show you a little bit of what he's about. Yeah. So this is Steve and Maggie. He's on YouTube, and there's lots of them. So
it's Steve and Maggie. Happy Halloween.
Probably recite this word for word myself. Lots of really vibrant, lots of feeling things going on. And they repeat phrases, so you might hear it.
What is it?
Here.
There are ghosts
What is it?
and monsters and witches and Oh, Maggie, stop it. Look, there are no such things as witches, ghosts, or
You see, they're
monsters.
repeating the
Stop
language
being
there. So there's loads and loads of Steve and Maggie videos out there, and Steve and Maggie songs and things like that. So I'd really encourage you to look that up. It's a really good one. And they repeat things nearly 3 times. So what is it? It's a pumpkin. What is it? Say it with me. It's a pumpkin. What is it? It's a pumpkin. So it's really kind of, giving children that really rich input by repeating it. And obviously all of the better if you can watch it with your child. Then we also have super simple songs, which is a great one if you're on the go. You can get it on Spotify. You can get it on YouTube if you're looking at screens. And they have a range of nursery rhymes. They have new songs. There's lots of repetition in all of the songs. They have really nice illustrated videos. And they often combine everything
is my head.
With action.
These are my
so you're
eyes.
teaching, the children are
is my nose.
learning language,
These are my ears.
they're pairing it with motor gestures
This
as
is
well.
my
So
mouth.
what we were talking about.
These
So we'd
are
really encourage you to get super simple songs on your your phones or on your screens, and just get the playlist going, and don't sue me for the annoyance. You'll be singing along in no time and you'll know them all off by heart. This is also a really good one, and this is Yakadi. So Yakadi is a really nice one as well for young children.
Yucky yuck! I know you can. It will fill you up with whiz pop bang. Dog. You say dog. More dog.
So you can see again, there's lots of repetition there of different vocabulary items and things like that. So that's a really nice one as well. And then we've got CBeebies as well, which is really nice content, and then RTE Kids as well. So they are just the things that we'd be recommending around that and around screens, if just to be mindful of, and things if you're looking to develop your child's language. So there's lots of really nice kind of content out there. So we will be sending out the presentation with the links to all of these here. So just something to leave you with, and Alison, you might pop into the chat the link to the survey if people wouldn't mind clicking on that link. It really will just take you less than 5 minutes. I'd be really interested to hear your feedback, and also if there was something that you were expecting here this evening that didn't come up, we can look at covering it in the subsequent 2 sessions as well, or any improvements that you'd like to suggest. We'd love to hear them. So just ways to encourage communication development, be animated, use high-pitched sing-song voice, play with sounds, don't be afraid to get silly, play with your child, use your facial expressions and gesture, encourage the 2-way communication, respond to your toddler, respond to your baby, read with your child, and expand their vocabulary. So then it comes to, we're talking about when should you refer to speech and language therapy, and maybe to other services. Maybe you have other developmental concerns around your child, they're not developing as you would expect for their age in other areas also. So speech and language, so if they have a spoken language delay, so they're not using the number of words expected for their age. If their understanding is not where it should be, so if they're having difficulties in the area of understanding, if they're experiencing pronunciation difficulties, if they're not being understood by others outside your own household, or it's impacting on their communication, you'd also refer. Or if you are concerned with any other areas of development, you would refer for multidisciplinary assessment. So it might be assessment of need, or multidisciplinary assessment with an SOT, with an OT who'd look at motor milestones and motor development and activities of daily living, so their self-care skills. Or you might be looking for a psychological assessment as well, looking at their cognitive development, their social skills, depending on your concerns. So I would encourage you to speak to your public health nurse or to your local SLT department, or if you have any specific questions, please do pop them in the chat and we will, or you could email info@cdi.ie as well if it's something that you don't feel comfortable with popping in the chat here. I do see that there's lots of chat there coming up, so that I'm guessing that they are questions. So I'm just mindful of the time. So well done to you all for staying with us. I hope you did find tonight's session useful and that you do take home some valuable points from the content that we've covered today. Just something to remember, that you are your child's best teacher, and I know that it can be worrying when you are concerned about your child, but don't underestimate the importance of the role that you play in their development. And sometimes we wonder when we're waiting for a child to talk, will it ever happen? But keep going, keep pouring that information into that little brain, keep exposing them to new words, new language, new vocabulary, expanding their language, responding to their communication intent. And parents who just talk as they go about their daily activities, expose their child, to 1,000 to 2,000 words every hour. So just remember your impact that you have with your on your child and their development. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and Alison, we're going to take all the chat questions and save those. And I'd like to thank you very much for your attendance here this evening. And I would encourage you to please do complete the survey and give us that feedback, because obviously that helps us to plan future events, and if people find this useful, that's something that we might look to deliver again, and we may add on different sessions and tailor the sessions to that. So thank you very much. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening, and hopefully you did get to have a hot cup of tea or a few minutes to yourself before the madness starts again tomorrow. So take care, and we look forward to seeing you all here next Wednesday at the same time, where Gemma will be taking you through some kind of more strategy-based strategies to support communication development with your children. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. I have got a note of all the questions, and we will get back to you via email as well. A few people were just asking about books, so I just encourage you to tune in on week 3, because we'll be covering a lot about books, and there's some nice tips and things for you then. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Good night.
Bye.